Today's case is being narrated by the amazing channel, The Crime Reel. So sit back as The Crime Reel takes us to 1970s South Africa.
Marlene Lehnberg was born on October the 13th, 1955 in Cape Town. During her childhood, her parents were very strict and she rarely went out. Her father was said to be a very moralistic person who showed very little affection towards his children. Instead, he made sure that they concentrated on their studies and schoolwork. Marlene, however, proved to be a very good student. She was a bright and intelligent girl who often came top of her class. Despite her academic achievements at the end of 1971, she left school and in February 1972 started working. She obtained a position as the receptionist at the orthopaedic workshop of the Red Cross Children's Hospital in Cape Town. This new way of life was a great change for her. Surrounded by adults and now a young woman, she was no longer controlled by her father's puritanical rules. Soon after starting at the hospital, she was introduced to the chief orthopaedic technician, an energetic man named Christian Funderlinder. He was polite and friendly and nearly 30 years her senior. After work, colleagues would often go out for a drink, and Christian paid a lot of attention to the new, young, attractive receptionist. Other hospital employees soon noticed that a friendship had developed between them. Perhaps it was because Marlene saw Christian as a more understanding and caring father figure than her own father had been. Marlene paid particular attention to Christian, and it was obvious to their colleagues that they had a unique relationship. He would try to see her at every opportunity, whether that be passing her desk or taking her to lunch. It seemed that he had become very attracted to the young, flirtatious receptionist. When Marlene was 18 years old, she left her parents' home and moved into a boarding house. She now had the independence that she had so long desired, and as her relationship with Christian developed, he started to take her home after work and spend as much time in her company as he could. Within a year of first meeting, the relationship between Marlene and Christian became more intimate, and Marlene's infatuation with him turned into an obsession. Christian, however, was married and had children. His wife was apparently a very nice lady called Susanna, and he had no intention of leaving her despite his impassioned relationship with Marlene. He knew that with such an age difference, the relationship with Marlene would probably never last, and he told her that for the sake of his children, he would not leave his wife. Marlene, however, was still young and impressionable, and continued to hold on to the hope that she and Christian would end up together. In early 1974, Susanna received an anonymous telephone call informing her of her husband's infidelity. She confronted Christian, but he dismissed it as a crank call. He realised, however, that he would have to cool his relationship with Marlene. By July of the same year, Marlene had become fed up with the fact that she was spending less time with Christian. She told him that she was considering leaving Cape Town and moving to Johannesburg. Christian was upset by her decision and spent the next few weeks trying to convince her to stay, saying that everything would turn out all right. But things did not really change, so in September 1974, Marlene made a somewhat strange decision. She decided to telephone Christian's wife, Susanna, and tell her about her husband's infidelities. However, Susanna didn't respond. She just hung up the telephone. A few weeks later, she telephoned her again, this time with more success, as Susanna agreed to meet her. So in early October, Christian's wife and mistress met in the Cape Town suburb of Belleville. Marlene was hoping that she could convince Susanna that her marriage was over and she should let Christian be with her, the woman he loved. But Susanna had no intention of leaving her husband and told her that a divorce was totally out of the question. So as long as Marlene didn't mind sharing Christian, neither did she. Not long after Marlene's meeting with Susanna, she was introduced to a man named Martinus Charles Chuhu. He was 33 years old and unemployed. He had lost a leg in a car accident and had come to the orthopaedic workshop in order to get an artificial limb adjusted as it was causing him discomfort. Unfortunately, his disability had also affected his mental health, and Martinus had become a quiet and withdrawn character. Marlene spoke with him, and she soon discovered that he often visited a shop called Solly's Trading Store, which was only a short distance from his house in the poor Cape Town neighbourhood of Retreat. Marlene wrote to him using the store as a delivery address, asking him to contact her if he wanted to earn good money. A few days later, she saw a scruffy-looking man lurking outside the orthopaedic workshop, and when she looked again, she realised that the man was Martinus Chuhu. Sensing that her plan may work, she took R1 from her purse and gave it to him. She then whispered that he should meet her at the Rondebosch Town Hall at 7 in the evening. 7 o'clock arrived, and Marlene arrived at the town hall and saw that Martinus was waiting for her by the entrance. On the way, she had stopped to buy a bottle of gin, which she gave to him. He was intrigued. What was it this young lady wanted with him? An unemployed, one-legged man. Marlene did not want to be hanging around outside the town hall for any longer than she needed, so she wasted no time in telling him the job she had in mind for him. "I'd like you to murder someone for me," she said. "A woman." Martinus was taken aback. He thought that Marlene had probably wanted him to do something illegal, but not this. "But Miss Marlene," he replied, "I can't do a thing like that. It will send me to the gallows." Marlene Lehnberg, however, was a persuasive young woman. She calmly asked him if he had ever been in court before, and he said that he was once charged with being in possession of a dangerous weapon. Marlene then told him that he was just the sort of person she was looking for, someone who can handle a dangerous weapon. Despite his initial resistance, Martinus eventually agreed to Marlene's somewhat bizarre request, and a few days later went to the address given to him in the Cape Town suburb of Boston, which was where Mrs. Funderlinde lived. When he arrived at her home in Gladstone Street, he hesitantly knocked on the door, and when his intended victim answered, instead of doing as Marlene had asked, Martinus nervously asked for some change. The lady just looked at him and said she had not got any and shut the door. A week later, Martinus met Marlene again. He told her that he was too afraid of the consequences to go through with her plan, but Marlene was not about to end her dream of being with Christian and told him that she would ensure that the hospital sped up the production of his new prosthetic leg if he killed Mrs. Funderlinde. Marlene then handed him a radio. Martinus was still very apprehensive, but nevertheless he returned to Gladstone Street. Only this time his nerves again got the better of him, and he just walked past the house, making no attempt to enter. Now getting quite frustrated, Marlene wrote another note to Martinus, urging him to go through with the murder, and when she saw him shortly afterwards, she told him she would give him a car once the crime had been committed. In October 1974, Marlene resigned from her position at the hospital. She had worked there for over 2.5 years and told her colleagues that she was going to leave Cape Town. A few days later, driving her white Ford Anglia, Marlene collected Martinus from his very humble home in Retreat. They talked about what he had to do, and Marlene drove to the house in Gladstone Street. Armed with a hammer, Martinus got out of the car. He shut the car door, and before he had time to change his mind, Marlene sped off. Susanna, however, had been at her front window, and on seeing a man outside her house who had previously knocked at her door and asked for money, she called the police. They soon arrived and took him to the station, where he was beaten and warned never to return to the area. Marlene was getting a bit despondent with her chosen accomplice, so decided to look elsewhere. She approached a 24-year-old engineering student named Robert Newman, who lived in the same boarding house as her, and asked if she could borrow his Llama pistol. When he said that she absolutely could not, she strangely asked him if he would kill someone for her. Again he said no, but on the 28th of October, the pistol was stolen from his room. He reported the theft to the police, and informed them of his conversation with Marlene. 1 week later, on Monday the 4th of November 1974, Marlene drove to the neighbourhood where Martinus lived. She parked outside his house, and when he came out to speak with her, she told him that she was on her way to Johannesburg. She then asked him to accompany her to Susanna's house in Gladstone Street so she could say goodbye to Christian. Despite being told by police not to return there, Martinus reluctantly got in the passenger seat and Marlene drove away. Before they arrived at the house, Marlene looked at him. She handed him the Lama pistol and said, "You know what you have to do." During the morning, Christian Funderlinder tried to contact his wife on several occasions. He thought it strange that she had not answered the phone, as she had not told him that she was going out. He decided to phone his daughter Zelda, who worked at Tygerberg Hospital, and asked her if she would go home at lunchtime to see if Susanna was okay. When Zelda arrived home, the house was locked. She was now starting to worry, as she knew that a strange man had recently been seen near the house. She peered through a window, and there on the lounge floor she saw her mother lying motionless. Zelda then rushed to a neighbour's house and phoned the police. The police arrived, they inspected the scene, and soon after confirmed that Susanna Funderlinder had been murdered. They also identified their main suspect, a one-legged black male who had been seen in and around the neighbourhood on at least 2 previous occasions. Despite picking him up, taking him to the station and warning him never to come back to the area, the police had no address for Martinus, and finding out where he lived was proving difficult. The police interviewed staff at the orthopaedic workshop, and eventually the investigation led them to Marlene Lehnberg. It was now the 13th of November. Lieutenant Roland Ferry of the Brixton Murder and Robbery Squad went to interview her. She was staying at her uncle's house in Bryanston, but when the police arrived, she agreed to accompany Lieutenant Ferry to the police station for questioning. During the journey, she told the officers that she was the lover of the victim's husband, and ever since her mother had told her of the tragic event, she had been expecting the police to contact her. When asked if she had an association with a one-legged black male, she said that she did not, but Lieutenant Ferry noticed that during his questioning, she seemed unnaturally nervous. The lieutenant then asked her about her conversation with Mr. Robert Newman. "Did you request him to get rid of her for you?" asked the lieutenant. Marlene admitted that she had, but she insisted that it was just a remark made in jest. After a while, another police officer took over the questioning, and suddenly Marlene just said, "I took him there. I waited for him. He came back and I took him home." With that, Marlene Lehnberg was arrested and formally charged with the murder of Mrs. Susanna Funderlinder. Later that day, the police in Cape Town arrested Martinus Charles Chuhu. They searched his house and found 2 pistols that they believed were used in the crime. They then also charged him with the murder of Mrs. Funderlinder. The trial of Marlene Lehnberg and Martinus Charles Chuhu began at the Cape Town Supreme Court on the 5th of March 1975. The case had intrigued the South African public and had mass media attention. Marlene told the court that on Monday the 4th of November 1974, she drove Martinus to the victim's house in Gladstone Street. She then got out of the car and rang the doorbell, but then returned to the car and waited while Martinus went into the house and committed the murder. This version of events differed considerably from the story told by Martinus Charles Chuhu. He said that Marlene did indeed get out of the car and ring the bell, but she did not return to the car. Instead, she entered the house with him. He said that Mrs. Funderlinder was scared and tried to get to the phone to call the police. She was stopped by Marlene, and then she fell and hit her head on the door. While she was on the floor, Marlene hit her with the pistol. Martinus then said that Marlene told him to strangle Mrs. Funderlinder before handing him a pair of scissors she had found in a drawer and instructed him to stab her. Before they left the house, he said that Marlene had covered him in green dye from a gas pistol, which she had found behind a picture in the living room. He added that she told him that if he went to the police, she would blame him and deny any involvement in the crime. They both then went back to the car and she dropped him back at his house. The version of the events described by Martinus seemed to be more credible. The pathologist reported that the body had 7 stab wounds, and a neighbour of the Funderlindas named Mrs. Murray told the court that on the morning of the 4th of November she was out walking past the house when she noticed a white Ford Anglia car. She walked back past the car 10 or 12 minutes later, and on both occasions there was no one inside the vehicle. The trial lasted for 7 days, and over 30 witnesses gave evidence. The judge, Mr. Justice Demont, and his 2 assessors deliberated overnight before returning to give their verdicts. They found both defendants, Marlene Lehnberg and Martinus Charles Chuhu, guilty of murder, and they were both sentenced to death. The defence appealed the sentences, and in July 1975 they were commuted. Marlene's to 20 years imprisonment and Martinus to 15 years. In June 1986, Martinus Charles Chuhu was released and later became an evangelical preacher. He died in a car accident in 1992. Marlene was let out of prison on parole in December 1986. She lived out her life in relative obscurity, and after suffering with various illnesses, she died by her own hand in October 2015, 5 days before her 60th birthday. Christian Funderlinda moved to Krugersdorp so that he could visit his wife's grave on her family's farm in the Magaliesberg Mountains. He died in 1983.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for watching. And thank you to the amazing Crime Reel for narrating this case. I've left a link below for the Crime Reel's channel, so if you would like to see some remarkable crime cases, please just click on the link. And next week, I will be back and hope to see you all in the next brief case.
Psst. Hey guys, it's the Crime Reel, I'm back. Just to quickly say, this is one of my little signatures on my videos, that I do a little secret message at the end. If you're still listening to this, add the words bamboozle somewhere in the comments. Let's bamboozle the non-listeners. Also, some great news. Briefcase is going to narrate a case pretty soon, but that's only for you lot that are listening. Cheers guys, thanks for your support. Goodbye.